Peter, in trying to get to the reality beneath the appearances, the question that can be asked is, what is there? Or what does it mean to ask what is there? Or is this even a legitimate question to ask what things are real? How can we approach this question?
What things are real is one question you asked, and what things are there is another question you asked. Now, one wonders if there's really two different questions. That is, could there be something that wasn't real? And that is, if you ask the question, answer what is the question, what is there? Aren't you answering the question, what is real? I think the answer to that apparent puzzle is just that you're really distinguishing between appearance and reality. That is, you say, you're saying, I just don't want to know what sorts of things there seem to be. I want to know what sorts of things there are. And if you like, you can add really, but really doesn't, I think, add. So what things are there? This has been a question that has divided philosophers down the ages. And one of the divisions is about the status that those philosophers give to the things that we normally think there are, and to the things that the philosophers, the ones who have penetrated, or the metaphysicians, the ones who have penetrated the surface of this question, say there are. Plato, thought that the things that we see around us, the things that people would normally say exist, hardly exist at all. What really exists are things that, what exists more firmly than this chair would be the kinds of things that mathematicians investigate. Geometers working on triangles and spheres and geometrical figures and constructions generally. And even more real than those. Well, there is something that stands behind everything and is even more real than those. Something absolutely unchanging. Something that the physical world that we're in, these barely real things around us, merely imitate. Well, philosophers have had all sorts of different things to say about that during the ages, about what's really there. Some philosophers, say we're completely right. Maybe I should say completely right. At least everything we believe about what there is right. No doubt there are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in our philosophy, but there are at least in heaven and earth all those things, or almost all of those things that are dreamt of in our philosophy. Some say we're completely wrong. Some say that time and space aren't real. Some say that matter isn't real. So you could almost say that metaphysics is the part of philosophy that attempts to answer the question, what is there? Since it's not easy to make a distinction between the being of a thing and its most important essential features. Now, let me give an example of something in this area. It's a very, very straightforward example. Most people, and I think most philosophers today, at least most philosophers of the sort that belong to my philosophical community, analytical philosophers, take it for granted that there are ordinary physical objects, what J.L. Austin called medium-sized specimens of dry goods. Chairs, for example. That's the sort of thing I wonder about. That is, it may seem strange to deny the existence of chairs, but look, we have all these atoms in this vicinity. They're arranged this way. They are, in a certain sense, stuck together. They have a complicated kind of interaction that makes for the presence of solid matter. But is there any need to say that they really add up to anything? If they do add up to something, it has some very strange features. And we have to ask, when in general do things add up to things? It would seem to me, rather than give some answer to that question that implies that these atoms here add up to a chair, it would be much simpler to say that they just don't add up to anything at all. And at any rate, I don't have to answer puzzling questions about chairs that metaphysicians who say the chair is really there has to answer, such as, if you cut a little piece out of it and burn it, is it still there? That's a question that if I deny the existence of chairs, and of course tables and physical objects generally, can safely ignore.
How can we take this mass of things that may be real or not real or exist or don't exist and give it sort of a taxonomy to organize it into categories? Or talk about concrete things and abstract things, for example.
Ever since very early in the story of philosophy, philosophers have wanted to divide the things that there are into different categories. And that categories, like the biological categories, much more general than that. Aristotle attempted a list of categories, for example. I'd be pleased to offer a list of categories. It would be as controversial as anything that any metaphysician has ever said. But it seems to me that there are things of the sorts that mathematicians investigate. I take, for example, very seriously what G.H. Hardy said when he said that as a mathematician, he's just like someone observing a distant mountain range and making a record of what he sees there, an objectively existing independent reality that he has some sort of access to. I would say that there are attributes or qualities or properties of things in addition to the things themselves. After all, we say that there are when we say such things as that spiders and insects have many properties in common. That's to say that there are properties that belong both to spiders and to insects. Having an exoskeleton, for example. It seems to me that if you analyze what we say, it's hard to make sense of what we say being true without the supposition that it commits us to the existence of these abstractions.
And does that mean these abstractions have some real existence that are eternal because they can't seem to be created?
Yeah, I wouldn't see how you could imagine an omnipotent God. You can mention any set of consistent properties to him and ask him to create something that brings those properties together in one thing, but where do the properties come from? I think the properties are just there, something that even God just has to deal with. This is the set of properties that there are, which is not to say that they're the set of properties that anything has. Mm-hmm. After all, maybe there's such a property as being an object that has 2,000 sides, and maybe nothing has that property. Mm-hmm. But of course, you could ask God to create something that had that property, and he'd know what property you meant, and he'd know what a thing would have to be like in order to meet your request, because he knew what property you meant. The properties you might think of as ways things could be, or possibilities for the way objects are. Those possibilities have to be there. That, at any rate, is my view of abstract objects.